It's 746 million miles to Earth, I've been in the loony bin for 3 years, my dead girlfriend keeps talking to me, I'm battling space zombies, and I got a new suit. Hit it! The sequel to the beloved survival horror game Dead Space, Dead Space 2 follows the now not-so-quiet Isaac Clarke as he battles the Necromorph hordes once again. Taking place about 3 years after the events of the first game, we learn that Isaac has no memory of what's transpired since his horrific ordeal on the USG Ishimura in Aegis 7. Finding himself an unwitting patient of asylum aboard a massive space station called the Sprawl, Isaac must navigate his way across a densely populated space station, all the while dealing with another Necromorph outbreak and his ever-growing insanity. Which of course manifests itself as his undead screaming girlfriend. Not the best circumstances for our intrepid blue-collar engineer. I have to admit, I had some reservations about a Dead Space sequel. Not that I didn't want it or that Redwood Shores, now Visceral Games, wasn't capable of creating a fantastic sequel, but the first Dead Space felt like such a lightning-in-a-bottle type of game for me. It incorporates so many things that I love in horror, whether it be the lived-in sci-fi setting or the grotesque creature design. It just gave me everything that I wanted in a horror game. However, I'm confident saying that Visceral Games made a fantastic second installment, and though it has a greater focus on action this time around, it's still a really good survival horror game experience. Think of it as the Aliens of the Dead Space franchise. In terms of story and characters, Visceral does spend more time in giving Isaac a voice, and I mean literally giving him a voice. As a fan of voice acting in games, I actually thought this was an excellent addition, and it made me empathize with Isaac more. And Visceral creates a number of tense and dramatic scenes that probably wouldn't have worked if Isaac didn't have a voice. My praises to Isaac's voice actor Gunnar Wright. He did a great job. The supporting cast is also a bit more memorable this time around, with Ellie Langford and Nolan Strauss. Ellie is a pilot aboard the space station who lost her crew during the start of the outbreak, while Strauss, much like Isaac, has undergone the same horrific treatments at the insane asylum and is dealing with his own set of hallucinations and deteriorating mental state. Unlike Hammond or Kendra, who are more your standard corporate military stock characters in Dead Space 1, Ellie and Strauss's personalities felt very different from one another, to where when you had interactions with them as Isaac, those moments felt more personal and certainly more memorable. Along with a few new faces, we're also introduced to a new location in the form of Titan Station, or as it's more commonly referred to as by its nearly 1 million inhabitants, the Sprawl. While the Ishimura was very much a working-class blue-collar trucking vessel, the Sprawl is basically a city in space. It's filled with apartment complexes, various stores, a mall, and even schools. What I like about these locations is that it's very much like the first game in terms of showing a lived-in, gritty sci-fi world. But this time around, it's also showing the civilian side of things in the Dead Space universe. Hearing the store jingles or advertisements or even the school announcements mixed in with the sounds of the crumbling station set like a really great mood of horror and desperation. Now, was the Sprawl as memorable as the USG Ishimura? Probably not, at least for me, but I do like that it's different enough and it's a cool take on an urban metropolis in space. Combat and gameplay are very much the same as they were in the first game, although there are a few new additions. Sometimes you'll encounter puzzles where you have to hack consoles to open doors, activate machines, or even repair damaged equipment to progress further in a level. Zero-G environments also return, but instead of jumping from place to place, you're able to maneuver yourself via thrusters attached to your suit. There are a few new weapons in the game, like the Secret Rifle, which serves as a very powerful sniper rifle. And there's also the Javelin gun, which fires these high-velocity titanium spikes that lets you pin Necromorphs to the wall and other objects. Now, even though I like some of the new weapons featured in the game, I still found myself using the Plasma Cutter. That weapon is just so good and versatile for any type of situation. Like I've said in the past, it's just one of the best video game weapons of all time, and at this point, it's just hard to top it. There are also several new Necromorph types, and there are a few notable standouts among them. You have new ones like the Puker, which vomits a corrosive acid that's capable of melting metal and flesh. You also have the Pack, which are definitely one of the more disturbing enemy types that you encounter in the game. They're one of the few Necromorph creatures that are created from the corpses of children, and they actually attack in large numbers to try to overwhelm you. But probably my favorite new Necromorph type has to be the Stalker. The Stalker exhibits behavior that is unlike most Necromorphs seen in the series. While most Necromorph types will come straight at you like zombies, the Stalker, as its name suggests, stalks you. It will move behind cover and often trying to flank you, and though it will bull rush you from time to time, the way it exhibits a sort of patience before attacking you makes it one of the scariest enemies in the game. Plus, the sound that it makes, which is this chirping wail, is almost more disturbing, off-putting than the guttural screams that most typical Necromorphs make. Honestly, the Stalker reminds me a lot of the raptors from Jurassic Park. I'm not sure if Visceral drew inspiration for the Stalker from the film series, but I can totally see if they did. It's just a really cool enemy type overall. Now let's talk about some of the weird stuff. For those of you that care, Dead Space 2 also comes bundled with a multiplayer mode. And from what I can guess, its inclusion only exists is because EA demanded it. For those of you that don't know, EA mandated a few years ago that all of their AAA games come with a multiplayer component of some capacity. According to them and those within the industry, it's meant to extend the longevity of their game. Personally, I think it's a stupid and obnoxious policy that's hurt a number of their properties, but it hasn't stopped them from forcing it on their developers. Dead Space 2's multiplayer mode is called Outbreak, and it pits 2 player-controlled teams against one another. You have one team which is made up of 4 humans, and another team which is made up of 4 necromorphs. A lot of matches are set in different locations, and then you also have different objectives depending on whether you're the humans or the necromorphs. Is it terrible? No, but its inclusion feels like such an afterthought that it's superfluous to the overall experience. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if most people have forgotten that the game has a multiplayer component. Still, I'm sure EA won't force unnecessary multiplayer modes into future Dead Space sequels. We'll talk about that later. Unforgettable multiplayer aside, Dead Space 2 is still giving you a great survival horror game experience, despite having a little bit more action than the first game. The combat and the environmental storytelling is still excellent. It features probably the scariest necromorph variations in the entire series. And the addition of Isaac's deteriorating psyche adds another layer narratively and gameplay-wise to an already enjoyable game. For me, Dead Space 2 is the very definition of a big buy.
Shut up and take my money!
But what about you? What did you think of Dead Space 2 and some of the new additions made by Visceral Games? Just leave a comment below and let me know if you like these reviews, let's plays, and other videos. Be sure to like and subscribe to keep up with all the latest content. And remember, keep it classy.